Hey everybody, thank you guys so much for joining us. We are so excited to have AG on today. We're going to wait just about a minute or two before we get started. That way anyone that's sitting down and logging in has an opportunity to join us. We'll start at 12:02, and thank you again.
I'm digging that.
This music is great.
I feel like I'm at like a tropical resort or something.
Yeah. We need like pina coladas now.
Yeah, that is very, turn it up, David. I'm all about this, it's great.
I can't take it seriously, but I like it. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, we always wait a minute or two before we get started, and we have been joking that we need music. So you are our guinea pigs this time around, and if you've been on the call, make sure you tell us here in the chat box what you think about this calypso music.
I'm impressed you knew the genre. I didn't know that. I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, I was thinking of elevator music.
What's that?
I was thinking it's elevator music.
Yeah, it's got the elevator music attitude. Yeah, that's AG. It is 12:02, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, David, for that awesome background music. I know we talked through most of it, but it was so exciting. AG's camera is not working with the platform today, so he is on the call for those of you that are joining us. We just can't see him, but fortunately we do get to hear him, and we're so excited to hear what he has to say. As you know, if you have been with us before, we have Wade Comeaux, our CEO, joining us, and Wade is super excited today because we looked at some really awesome data. And yes. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just very excited. I'll let you continue with the intro.
And we have our Director of Lending, Jeff Johnson. Thank you guys for joining us. And then we have AG. And for those of you that are from our audience and aren't familiar, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about AG. He's the CEO of Real Acquisitions and a managing partner for the Alexander Green Developers Group. He's also an active investor, much like Wade and Jeff, and they invest in rental portfolios. And AG also has a commercial real estate investment group as well. We're super excited to have him on here to go over some of the new data that we acquired today, and also to tell you how to invest during a pandemic. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started.
Just before we roll in, I did want to say, AG, it's been a while, but had one of the best networking events in the city. It was always very top-notch, well done, good speakers. Can't wait for them to get started again one of these days, I'm sure.
Same here, man. It seems like, somebody was telling me the other day that time seems to have compressed with this COVID thing. It doesn't feel like that we've been almost out of commission since March. It's almost 4 months, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, it has been an interesting time. We definitely miss AG's meetings. Also, he has a great platform for finding deals in the real estate space. A lot of other data that he provides. So I would definitely encourage you guys to check out AG's platform. We actually mentioned it in our wholesaling webinar, which we did on Tuesday, as a great place to find deals and analyze the deals that you find. So anyway.
And again, sorry, go ahead, AG.
I was going to thank you for the plugin.
No worries.
And again, this is our every webinar disclaimer, just a reminder that the information we provide you is for educational content. It is up to you to make your own decisions before going into an investment and to do your own due diligence. All right, so let's get started. The new normal. AG, you want to take this one?
Absolutely. Well, I do want to begin by saying that times are interesting, but it is in interesting times that interesting opportunities and big fortunes are made. So if you're logging into this webinar, and chances are that you have been impacted in one way or the other with this COVID crisis, But don't think of this as a crisis. Really think of this as repositioning yourself and taking advantage of some great opportunities that are coming up in place. I will say this, the new normal for us has been preparation. It is a time where all the preparation that has been done for years and years and years has come into play. Liquidity is being deployed. We'll talk about that, I guess, in the next few minutes. We are getting rid of a lot of fat in the operation, like many businesses are. More than anything else, we're investing heavily in online systems, sales systems, acquisition systems, staff that is trained in doing transactions remotely. And all the models that existed of sales previously, the eyeball to eyeball, belly to belly models are being implemented very efficiently online. So don't let anyone tell you that you cannot do business as effectively online today. And I think COVID has brought that to a whole new paradigm. I know that you guys, Catalyst, you guys have always been in the forefront of technology. You've always embraced technology. You've always, I remember our discussion with last year over breakfast when the amount of money you were investing in an online platform. I bet you are happy with that investment that you made last year, right?
Yeah, no doubt. It has made the customer experience better, and it has enabled us to work from home. And in many instances, or now we're on a rotational work from home schedule, but we've always tried to provide excellent customer service while also providing the safest environment possible for employees. And technology is essential to be able to do that.
Yeah,
Excellent.
this is, I don't know if you updated the AG, but basically the customers are able to upload any documents via a secure portal as opposed to emailing them in, which is always the riskiest way to get documents across. And also the software we bought, it allows people to submit for draws online as well. So the days of faxing in documents or scanning an email and handwriting, that stuff, they can literally log into their portal, click the items that are done and submit it in a matter of minutes. So it's really paid off for us, and hopefully the customers are enjoying it as well.
Absolutely, and I think the fact that you guys are growing in this pandemic is a testament to the smart investment decisions that you guys have made over the years. And again, guys, of course, a lot of these things that I'm sharing with you are as a result of, let's say, two perspectives that I have. One perspective is my main bread and butter, like many of you know, is in a single family buy and holds. Until about 2016, my wife and I held almost 92 single family homes in Houston. We've been very aggressively selling that. We're down to about 47 homes right now as we speak.
Wow.
So a lot of perspective that I've learned in the business is coming out of conventional debt. A lot of debt that the way that I own these properties is a regular commercial debt. So talking with bankers, talking with the loan programs that are coming in place. Of course, we've used short-term loan programs similar to what Wade you guys have. And again, I don't think anyone is competing in the phenomenal short-term as well as long-term loans that you're providing in the non-QM space. So kudos on continuing to doing that. But one is my perspective coming from that. And the second perspective that I have is since 2000, end of 2016, we went in single family, in the luxury single family construction, ground-up construction area. We've built about 18 homes north of about $2 million that sold them over the course of the last 5 years. It's been a very interesting business, keeps us on our toes. Excuse my language, but we are shitting bricks 11 months of the year, and then there's 1 month of payout. So that's the second perspective. And the third perspective that I'll be speaking out of is, again, real data generation company. And I apologize. There's a background noise coming from someplace. I cannot place where. Is it from me or maybe it got a little?
It may be, AG. It may be beneficial. I don't know if you double check that either your phone or computer are off. Sometimes if they're one or the other has to still be on, it can cause some reverb.
Okay, if it's causing a lot of nuisance, let me know. I'll switch to like a earphone. Okay, it's gone now. Perfect. Okay, already. So real acquisitions, we are probably the largest collection of wholesalers in Texas, at least. The majority of wholesalers in Texas use our data to find motivated sellers, potentially distressed properties. So we have a tremendous amount of conversations on what these guys are doing and seeing in the market space for finding deals, doing deals. So a lot of this information comes from there as well. So with these three perspectives in mind, I requested to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is what not to do or what to stay away from. I know everybody's talking about things and opportunities to do, and I guess as the conversation goes along, we'll touch on those topics briefly as well. But I do like talking about what not to do. So my first thing that I want to cover with you guys, the kind of deal that you should stay away from is what I like to call speculative deals. Now, everybody has their own definition of speculative deals, but in my definition of speculative deals that essentially are in context of real estate in not established neighborhoods. If right now you are a semi-seasoned real estate professional, I would caution you to do deals in any places other than seasoned neighborhood with solid comps. My conversations with banks, my conversations with the non-QM products similar to what you guys are doing, Wade, is that there's a lot of apprehension in banks, especially banks that are buying these non-QM products in the actual appraisal process and the appraisals of these properties. So any places like, for example, Heights has many neighborhoods where comps are all over the place. And in the last 10 years, investors have been able to shenanigan their way through, but I would highly caution in doing transactions and deals in those kind of areas. Without getting into what those areas are, I'll give you a perspective. If I were to rewind my business 3 years ago, and I would position myself today, if somebody were to bring me a deal in East Downtown in Edo, I would not do that deal today. Because 3 years ago, Edo had absolutely no established comparable history, had no established comp, had no established history of sales. And there are tons and tons and tons of neighborhoods that in Houston today that are considered up and coming, which by the way is a code word for ghetto. And in those up and coming and ghetto neighborhoods, stay away in today's market. That's my first suggestion to you guys, especially if you are new or are relatively new in the space. Any comments from you gentlemen there?
I would completely agree with that. I think if you're going to do an investment in a transitional area, it has to be at a price where you have the flexibility for the value to come in lower and to sell at a lower price. I think that's essential if you're going to do that. And really it should be for the more experienced players. And I think that there are people that know those neighborhoods and the streets, because the values can be vastly different street to street. And it's just a more complex investment. To your point, if you go in the suburbs, there's this one neighborhood with the same, K through 12 school system, and it's just better defined. And you have a very strong indication of where the property is going to sell and the quality of the rehab you need to complete in order to get that price.
Absolutely correct. And I'll tag on the context of speculative a little more is from a builder standpoint, we always considered speculative deals as deals that are, for example, on busy intersections. Location is great, neighborhood is wonderful, but they are on a busy intersection. They are facing a commercial property, they're facing a school, they're facing some non-residential area. That's a speculative deal. Properties that, believe it or not, are backing up to buyers. There's always been a lot of debate in Houston about buying properties that are one-time flooded. But my caveat is right now, I would not even touch those kind of deals. Properties that have any kind of a history of flooding, even one-time flooding, we are staying away from. So just go for absolutely slam dunk deals. I believe there's a question from the audience. Oh, maybe not. Okay. Number two, my second area of suggestion of staying away from is the $500,000 to a 1.5 million bracket. I would stay away from that bracket right now. You know, as a builder, I've always considered that bracket as the dreams of the rich and the means of the poor bracket. A lot of guys that had the ability and the desire of really, from an affordability standpoint, should be below $500,000, wanting homes in the $500,000 to 1.5 range. And these are the first tranche, the first level of people that are impacted when there's an economic disaster that happens. These are typically people that are dual income families. These are guys who are coming into affording these homes because they're two husband and wife working and they're affording these properties. And if there's one time where multiple factors are up in the air, oil and gas is up in the air, hospitality is up in the air, of course, financial services are up in the air. There's a very, very high probability that people with dual incomes, at least one of the income is going to be impacted. That's why we love sticking in markets below $500,000 and in markets above 1.5 million. And believe it or not, we've had trouble with conventional financing with commercial loans on new construction on our 700, 800,000 type projects. Like we were doing a townhome project in Edo. The ARV is about 850. The bank reduced the advance rate to 65%. Normally we get about 90% loan to cost financing, down to 65% overnight.
Wow.
On the other hand, we're doing a $2.8 million property in Tanglewood, stone's throw away from George Bush Sr., 90% financing, no problem all day long. With all these things happening in the market space. $500,000 to 1.5 million, just be very careful there. And I know SPAR published their data, I believe yesterday, their press release came out. ABOR, the Austin Board of Realtors, also released their data about 4 days ago. We have not seen any data from San Antonio Board of Realtors or the Netris, which is the DFW area yet. In fact, Netris has not published data since May of this year. But if you look at that data, there have been extremely conflicting information in the last 3 months. So I know that you guys will be going into some depths on that, but there is the data that was published yesterday from PAR. They did see, I believe they showed an 18% jump in the properties in the $500,000 to $750,000 range. So to me, that was really surprising, but I personally would not read too much into it, simply because banks are just not too excited about doing deals, new construction deals in that market space. Any comments on that before we move on to number 3?
We said the same thing in our previous webinar where we discussed the statistics that we normally encourage, especially new investors, to be in that 500 and below space. And honestly, the sweet spot for those newer investors, probably even 350 and below in those well-defined subdivisions. And I was not surprised that there were very positive moves overall in the hard data. I was surprised to see that 500 to 750 price point show such a big jump. But we'll dive into all of that in a moment.
Yeah, AG, I wonder why Dallas hasn't sent any stats for 2 months now. That's an odd thing, isn't it?
It's a non-profit organization, man.
Do what they want, I guess.
They work like a government. But yeah, so number 3 that I'll touch on briefly is, and you know, to be honest, I've never been excited about this trend in general, but I think in this time I'm being even more careful, which is projects where there's excessive rehab. And the way I define excessive rehab is projects where the rehab is more than 30% of the ARV. Projects, and I'll tell you why I'm seeing that. So perspective again, I guess, which is we normally spend about $11 a square foot on a spec home frame, which is your lumber, your basic sheathing, your what is called is a construction envelope for a stick home, for a 4-inch stud wall home in Texas. However, that $11 a square foot figure for new construction is now up to $18 a square foot. Not because there is no suppliers, because all the supply chains, all the way from Canada to Mexico, and of course China, are completely, absolutely dried up. So there is no material. There's tremendous amount of labor, which was always a big problem, which is where do we find quality labor? But for the very first time, basic material like lumber is now drying out of the market space. So if you're looking at doing a large rehab in the market space today, you are in for some surprises when it comes to material costs, not just your finish out costs, but basic lumber, basic sheathing, basic roofing, basic windows, tremendous amount of lack of supply chain. Call it a hyperinflation, call it a V-shaped recovery, whatever you may want to call it. But the reality is that large rehabs are going to be projects that are more than 3 months, 4 months, require significant amount of down to the studs kind of rehabs, are going to be very dangerous. The way that new construction builders hedge their bet, as you know, is that we pass that cost completely to the subcontractor, or for a large subdivision project, we have insurance against material change in prices. But most people doing 250, 350 ARV type projects are not going to have access to those instruments, those tools, and they'll primarily be funding it out of their pockets. And all the budgets right now are completely out the door with such large projects. Now the good side of that is there's ample of deals in the market space where you can get into established neighborhoods with 10-20% rehab ARV type deals, and ample of them in the market space in the especially my favorite price point for a new flipper, which is the 250 to 350 price range. In fact, we ran a report on real acquisitions yesterday, and one of the things we always love doing is in established neighborhoods, looking at over 65 folks with over 65 exemptions that have at least 10 years of ownership. A very simple, straightforward marketing lists. So we have these 18 marketing lists similar to that. And what we always do is we always go back and look at the people who've downloaded these lists from us, and we go back and we send them a survey. We say, okay, how many deals have you created from these lists? So believe it or not, overwhelmingly, the number of responses that people are doing from lists, your loan modification lists, your over 65 exemption lists, your HOA lien lists, those have gone up significantly in the last 2.5, 3 months. So there's definitely a lot of anxiety amongst the sellers, and properties wholesale deals are ample for folks that are wanting to do simple, straightforward transactions in established neighborhoods. Which leads me to my last point, which is if you are getting into transactions, one of the things I always encourage you to do is, especially in today's time, is getting into deals where you are prepared to hold these deals at least for 6 months, if not more. What that means is that given the jitteriness in the market, can you buy these properties, and if the asking price is not obtained at the time of sale, can you rent these properties? Can you Airbnb these properties? So essentially, can Airbnb or can debt service cover your Airbnb or rent, can it cover your essential debt service? I would highly encourage folks to look into that, and properties where debt service cannot be covered by short-term or long-term rentals, be careful of getting into those transactions. Now, interestingly enough, as much as Airbnb has taken a beating, Airbnb published or released their data about a month and a half ago on what they're seeing as Airbnb bookings. Airbnb is back with a bang on single-family homes. the demand for single families and Airbnb is through the roof. So if you guys are looking to do projects, rehabbing projects, fixing up deals, where you are considering the option, your exit strategy is Airbnb, those options are absolutely viable. Those are perfect deals. Those are perfect short-term rentals. Is a great short-term rental strategy for you to minimize or take care of your debt service. So these are my 4 things to stay away from if you are relatively new or coming in the market space as even semi seasoned investor.
Yeah, that last point, as an organization, we always try, we talk to flippers all the time and they apply as for a flip. And we always try to get them to get approved for long-term financing. And they wonder why I'm going to flip the property. It's like, well, things don't always go as planned. And if you have a defined exit strategy, if, like you said, things don't go right, you can switch it over to long-term financing, live to fight another day, rent the property out. Even if you lose a little bit of money, you're holding on to the property until, you feel like maybe a market correction happens and you get a price that you're happy with.
And Jeff,
You never know when things are going to go bad.
Sometimes I would say these things. I was talking, in fact, to Jacksonville Real Estate Association the other day. We were doing a similar webinar, and somebody raised the point. He said, "AG, aren't these things that you should be doing in a regular market anyway?" And the answer is yes, you should be doing these things. But the reality is that in a seller's market, sometimes you're not going to be able to get all of these pickings. But in today's market, and hence the opportunity, hence the phenomenal time this is to be getting into some great deals, is that you can pick and choose and you can go for deals where you're getting a pick of all of these 4 things when you're going into deals.
Yep.
Super.
So we'll talk a little bit about the data that came through and kind of tie it in with AG's recommendations and our overall recommendations on how to use this data to ensure you're making the right decisions on investments. And we had covered the information from May in our last session, and It was incredible how much more positivity there was in the numbers from May to June. There was a really big improvement overall. I think that the market stabilized a little bit, but there were indications in the May numbers that better things were coming because there were high numbers of deals under contract, and the overall supply was still very low at that point. So there were some indications that we talked about on the last call that looked like June could be better. And if you look at it, a year-over-year jump of 15.7%, and last year was a record month in most categories in Houston in June. So that's a really big increase. And then the $250,000 and $500,000 led the market. That range there with 28.3% year-over-year increase, and that's the area in large part that AG was just talking about. So it substantiates his statement that that's a really good space to be in. And like we said earlier, this is surprising, and I'm not sure exactly what it means, but that space from 500 to 750 did have an increase. And I think the previous quarter, it was a big drop. That 500 to 750 had the largest or second largest drop, and 750 to 1.5 also had a big drop.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I read a stat from HAR that basically said, year to date, Houston is basically on par with last year. Even with everything that's been going on, year to date number of sales is flat relative to last year, which is amazing given coronavirus.
Yeah, I think one thing I would say about that is, and I think it gives some positivity about the future because we don't know exactly what's going to happen with increased cases and other things like that. But I do get a sense both here and across the country that even if people feel less stable because of coronavirus, that more people do want to get out of apartment complexes. They want to have single family homes, and there's a real flight to space and to having your own amenities. So I think that's a good indication no matter what may happen with the coronavirus going forward. And we'll cover.
Yeah, if you look at the last bullet point on this slide here, it kind of points to that leases of single family homes are 15% year over year, which is just kind of, a lot of people go from apartments or condos to houses, and that's exactly what that would point to.
I also think people that may have been younger millennials that had not had as much interest in buying properties in the past, they may also be buying their first homes. They may be buying their starter homes at this time as well, because prices are so reasonable at this time and rates are so low that their payment over the long haul is going to be very attractive.
Yeah, I mean, a 262 median price, that's an all-time high, right? That says something. In the face of coronavirus, we're at an all-time high for median price, which is great.
Yeah, I was going to say that one of the other things that for some reason HAR does not publish, but one of the things we always like looking juxtaposed next to the HAR data is the data by Texas A&M Real Estate Center. And one of the things that they publish, and I encourage everybody in the audience to go and do that, just Google Texas A&M Real Estate Center, is they always publish the affordability index. And to me, that's for any real estate investor to be investing in cities, in small towns, or frankly, any place where the affordability continues to be high is an extremely wonderful long-term investment strategies, because at the end of the day, that's where migration of population will happen. And those properties will always appreciate. So one of the interesting things is majority of the Texas first tier and second tier cities, except Austin, obviously, continues to be in the top 50 ranked affordable cities across the United States. So it's a great indicator that no matter what you hear in the media, all the hoopla, all the apocalypse now information, Texas still continues to be a great place to be buying, fixing, flipping, holding on to real estate.
Yeah, it's amazing that Houston is, and I don't have the exact numbers for this time frame, but over the last 10 years, it's been approximately 7.5% appreciation over that time. And to still be in the top 50, despite that significant appreciation, just tells you how resilient this market is and how incomes are still continuing to rise at a steady level. There's a lot of people moving in. So there's a lot of positivity in the real estate market overall.
Absolutely. And one anti-statistic that I'll always add here is for those of you guys who are feeling that there is some kind of a feeling anxiety with all this information coming in from news channels, remember that in Texas, we are continuing to see a precipitous drop in mortality rate with COVID. Is even though there's a lot of information on the news channels about a rise in the number of cases, which is a very valid point, definitely something to be taken note of, and we should all practice caution. We also need to see something which most people are not talking about, which is the precipitous drop in the death or the mortality rate. I believe we're down to now, as ominous as it sounds, but we're down to now about 4,000 deaths a week, and we were at 16 or 17,000 at the peak. So there's a crazy drop there. So things are getting way better.
Yeah, I think the treatment strategy is a lot better because we've had time to work through it, and then I think the demographic of those being infected is a lot different as well. It seemed like it was nursing homes and other older category, and then now it's younger who happen to have not nearly as severe implications from catching. So hopefully that trend continues.
Yeah.
So on this slide, I think we may have mentioned it earlier, but it also looks in the single family rental space that things are staying steady, just slightly down on price, but leases overall up 15% year over year. That's a very positive number. I do think some of that had to do with some pent up demand because the May number was lower there. And then this is a little bit surprising to me. Townhomes and condominiums also went up on the rent. I'm not sure if that may be, I don't know exactly what that means, but it kind of seems counter to the move to space to a certain extent.
Well, I was talking to Richard Drake at Renters Warehouse the other day. And one of the things that we were discussing, and this is before the report came out, he says, AG, in general, there is such a dearth of rental properties right now, despite people expecting tenants to be not paying rent, landlords going under, but in general, the inventory of residential leases is so low that spill over into other forms of real estate, leasing real estate is but natural. So I'm not surprised that when people can't get into single family homes, they're getting into townhomes and condominiums.
It's a more approachable price point for sure.
Yep.
So this is the data we were talking about earlier, and it is a tale of two very different months for sure. In May, really the only number that was positive from May were a couple of things. One was the pending sales was up 23%. That was a very positive number, and that kind of was going to be those June and July transactions, candidly. And the inventory number, despite lower sales, continued to drop. Like it was from 4.1 to 3.5, and we discussed in our last session that a stable number is about 6 months. That's kind of where there's perceived equilibrium between supply and demand. And Houston has always been below that number, and it continues to drop at this point. But then you come into the month of July, and property sales, and this is year over year, not over the previous month. This is year over year growth of 18% in total sales, 15% in volume. Total active listings down 17%. That's a really big number year over year. Then you see that inventory number going from 3.5 to 3.2, down a full 1.1 months from last year. So that is just a big indicator that there is a lot of demand and not adequate supply.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, AG, what do you think? Because if you look at the total active listings, that is a huge drop, right? 36,000 is a really small number, but there's a ton of pending sales rolling into the month. I wonder what it's going to look like a month from now with so few listings but so many pending sales.
Yeah, so that's if you really think about it, the actual most telling indicator in all of this is the fact that the number of total listings in the market is down, which in a growing city, in a normal case, absolutely does not make sense. And it's
I'm sorry, AG, you kind of were cutting in and out there. Do you mind repeating that?
Sure. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say the most important statistic in all of this, if there's one stat that you can take home with some meaning, is that the number of listings itself is lower, which means the total number of people sitting on the sidelines waiting for the market to improve before they list their property has gone down significantly. And that's basically what this is. It's not that there's a problem in the total number of sales. That's basically pent up demand from all the closings that were not happening in the month of May. The funding that was stopped, the appraisals that were delayed, the inspections that were running late. That's basically what you're seeing is the jump in the total number of closings is mainly because of that. So I wouldn't worry about those numbers, but the number that really tells you what the situation in the market really is the total number of active listings. People are just not listing their homes. They're waiting for things to improve. They're waiting for things to stabilize before they list their property in the market space. And I was talking to, I don't remember this gentleman's name. He was actually spoke at the Real Acquisitions panel a couple of months ago, right when COVID started. I'll tell you the name in a moment. But he said that one of the most important things that you need to understand is while the actual number of sales is an important indicator, it is a trailing indicator. It is giving you a reflection of what's happening in the market as of a couple of months ago. What truly is a leading indicator is the number of listings in the market space. How many homes there are really in the market space? In a market space like Houston that sells $3 billion of real estate in a month, how many people are really in the market? That is a leading indicator. And you are seeing that that indicator definitely is down.
Destiny, I believe you may be muted.
Oh, there we go. I was saying we do have a little bit of information on the supply. So we touched base on that, but then we also have a graph from Texas A&M in here talking about average supply per year.
Perfect.
Yep. Jeff, you did a great job covering this one last time. Do you want to?
Sure. It's basically a, let's see, it's an indicator of the average and median homes, right? So if you look at the, I don't know which color is which, I believe the average is probably blue and the median is the orange, but it just shows how those numbers kind of move together. And what I see this as, because I talk to people all the time about, you know, should I do this deal? Should I not do this deal? If you're a long-term buy and hold investor and your plan is to hold on to these properties for 5 plus 10 years, it's almost like you can't lose, right? Unless you just pick the wrong neighborhood and you're unlucky. Or, you know, you buy a piece of property, you hold on to it, you keep tenants in it, whether you cash flow a lot or not, you know, 10, 15 years down the road, there should be a nice pot of gold at the end of the rainbow because Houston has steadily appreciated over just about any time period you can pick.
Yeah, it was interesting. Austin and I were talking a little bit, who's our team manager here at Catalyst. We were discussing objections that come up from people about the market today. And one of the objections that came up is, I'm not sure that it's the right time to invest. And I think that prices may drop a little bit over time. And we're not really seeing that in the numbers at the moment. But the other thing that's very interesting is that we've heard that same statement from people for the past 10 years. And all of those people that passed up those homes by making those statements in, 10 years ago, they missed out on enormous appreciation over that time frame. And Houston just really hasn't had the swings that the coasts have had, and other, even Austin, kind of areas that have big growth at certain times. And there has to be a pullback in that. It's really been a relatively steady for not just the last decade, but for several decades. It's been consistent and steady in Houston.
Yeah, if you look at this graph, guys, and this is wealth building 101 in front of you. How can you not look at this graph and say, as a young individual in my 20s, in my 30s, how can I not, in your case, teens, Wade, how can I not get in, buy a property, and then in the next 20, 30 years, be a multi-millionaire? This is it. This is the strategy right in front of you. Just look at the growth. You just can't go wrong.
Yep. People routinely pass deals that we put out over a couple thousand, and this chart is making that look like a questionable decision, because you're going to make up for that with appreciation in the rent, in very, very short fashion.
Absolutely.
So this, I asked Destiny to add this slide because I think it kind of points to what you were talking about earlier, AG. It kind of breaks out the tranches, and if you compare May to June, you can see every tranche was down. The highest tranche over 50% down, and then you compare that to June, where the normal, like you said, the Houston sweet spot, the 250 to 500, was up 28%, and if you tack on the previous month down 15, it's what is that, like a 40 some odd percent jump month over month. So 750 jumped 40% as well. So I wouldn't put too much stock into that number, like you said, but it is nice to see that the middle tranches, which is where we like our customers and investors to live, are all up significantly year over year.
Absolutely.
This next slide, talking about leading indicators and trying to know where the market's going, is a big one. I think Destiny, I went over the numbers this morning, and the number that excited me the most was definitely pending sales going up 40% year over year. That's a really big number. And we also saw permits, both nationally and locally. We covered that in our last meeting. Permits for new construction are also way up. So there's a lot of factors going into the fact that very smart people that are evaluating this are projecting there to be a lot of demand in single family.
This is that graph from Texas A&M, just kind of going over what the months of inventory look like.
This is a little bit dated, but we did pull it because it showed what happened in the last financial crisis. And there are some people that are afraid this may be a similar situation, and that was a housing crisis, whereas this is not a housing crisis. This is a health situation, and it's just a very, very different reaction in the market. At that time, you could see the inventory numbers, while they were not as bad in Houston and in Texas in general, you can see never really got above 8 months supply, or in other parts of the country, it got a year supply, which is double considered stable. You do see that number around 13 really drop in Texas, and that's been where the population growth really started to escalate in a lot of areas where people found housing difficult to get at a reasonable price, and then the job explosion that took place here because of a positive environment for companies moving into Houston and Austin and other areas like that really caused this total drop in that months of inventory number. Anything to add to that particular slide, AG, before we move on?
No, I was just going to say that for those of you guys who are interested in this kind of data, consider looking at the census, population census published, population growth by city. That's another great indicator that I love looking at. And you will be surprised, pleasantly surprised, what a phenomenal population growth we've had all across Texas, especially in Houston. With all the negative publicity sometimes that we get because of hurricanes and all this jazz, despite that, what a healthy growth in population that we've had.
I appreciate you keeping it PG, AG. A jazz term.
So I know this was one topic you wanted to discuss a little bit, AG, the foreclosure projection for the future. Where do you see this going?
Yeah, so we were all laughing when they came out. The federal government came out with these stopgap measures for protecting foreclosures. And we were all expecting that there'll be so much pre-foreclosure distress in the market space that investors will be able to pick up a lot of these transactions. But frankly, we are not seeing that. In any of the marketing that I'm seeing in the real acquisitions, customers are seeing pre-foreclosure deals, guys who are facing foreclosure are just not motivated enough at all to be able to come in the market space. The motivation has literally vanished away. In fact, if you are in an active foreclosure, you guys may know this. If you were in an active foreclosure, meaning you were delinquent before March, then the CARES Act does not apply to you. Meaning you cannot really call your bank and say, hey, I'm in financial distress, please postpone my payments. But do you know how many people who did call their bank and said, I want to avail the CARES provisions, even though they were in default, how many of them are actually taken to foreclosure? The answer is literally zero. So anybody who has been in default or was in default or was behind payments, was facing a foreclosure, they're calling the banks and saying, give me a 6 month of extension, and they're getting it like this. So I don't anticipate these transactions going anywhere anytime soon. One thing that we do see big time is people getting into subject to transactions. I think the right investor who has educated himself or herself in understanding what subject to transactioneering is going to be an extremely wealthy individual in the next 1 year. We've picked up, let's see, since the beginning of this COVID crisis, we've picked up 18 single family homes. I was completely out of the market space, but we've picked up 18 single family homes with less than $10,000 out of cash. The biggest problem with subject to has been in the last 3-4 years, where the average cost of reinstatement was approximately $32,000 across Texas. So if you're wanting to reinstate a loan and getting into a subject to deal, and by the way, when I'm saying this, are the audience allowed to ask questions?
We usually
Yes.
save the questions for the end, AG, because it can kind of, but we will cover them all. Is there one in particular that you think we should cover, that you think is
I
appropriate?
just want to make sure that I'm not talking over somebody's head. Is that the audience understands what subject to transactions really are? If you do not know what subject to transactions are, friends, it's essentially where you take over somebody's payments. So instead of paying off the debt at the time of buying a property, you go to the seller and you say, listen, you're facing an imminent foreclosure now in the near future. Let me take over your payments. Let me take over your debt servicing. You're not assuming the loan, you're simply assuming the payments to the loan. That's essentially what subject to transactions is. And it has always been a wonderful strategy, but over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, the biggest problem with subject to has been that going and taking over somebody's payments came with a big barrage of back payments, penalties, so much so that the cost of reinstatement was approximately $32,000, which is ridiculous. Just did not make sense. So that cost of reinstatement is going down significantly because people were 3 months, 4 months behind and had this anxiety where they don't believe they'll be able to catch up. Now in the market space, willing to do subject to transactions. That's essentially what I mean. So if you're waiting for a foreclosure barrage to be able to buy deals for cash, you're going to be disappointed. If you are looking to buy pre-foreclosure deals, educate yourself in subject to transactions. This is a great time where cost of reinstatement is down significantly, and you can get into these deals at a phenomenally low cash position. That's what my point is.
So why do you think it's significantly cheaper now? That's the part I didn't grasp.
So, I honestly feel that people who we were traditionally dealing with before were serial failures. They would go from one failed mortgage to another failed mortgage, and they were playing these games where we were running into situations where people had made payments in 2.5 years, and there was no foreclosure, or there was foreclosure. Maybe they just received the foreclosure notice. I believe COVID has brought a lot of anxiety in people who are 2 or 3 or 4 months behind and are not qualifying for the CARES Act. This anxiety is bringing these people in the market space right now, where we are able to get into folks with 2 or 3 months behind and get into these subject to transactions.
That makes sense.
I do think another important thing, I agree with AG's statement that foreclosures are going to be less than the last financial crisis. And I believe a big reason why is in the previous financial crisis, there was no requirement by federally backed loans to allow the borrower to have an alternative other than being required to come up with all their payments at one time at the end of the forbearance. That led to a tremendous amount of foreclosures because if someone couldn't pay one payment at the beginning, how are they going to pay 6 or 12 payments at the end? So in this particular situation, they have announced very clearly, and I would be surprised if it were to change, that homeowners are always going to be given other alternatives, which would be either adding the payments onto the end, some type of loan modification. But at the end of the day, it does not seem that there's going to be as big of a wave because there are going to be other alternatives other than having to come up with the full boat. So I agree with you that it's not going to be nearly as great because of that. Absolutely.
And again, if you are looking to understand how to get into subject to transactions, subject to deals, do attend some basic training. Real Acquisitions posts some great training on subject to transactions. But typically, your loan modifications and your pre foreclosures are great indicators. Guys who've been so there's a concept in real estate which is called assignment of substitute trustee. So essentially, for those of you who are new in the space, assignment of substitute trustee is a step that happens typically about 3 months before the actual notice of default is going to be sent. Sorry, the notice of 21-day sale is going to be sent, which is where everybody and their uncle jumps in the game of trying to buy pre-foreclosure, which is the 21-day notice of sale. But an event that occurs 3 months before that is an assignment of substitute trustee, which essentially the bank is appointing an actual foreclosure entity, an auction house, or a legal firm to perform the foreclosure. So all the deals that we have done in the last few months on subject to have come exclusively, I'm letting you know my secret right here, they're coming exclusively from assignment of substitute trustee filings. They were filed in anywhere from November to February. So for these 4 months, we've been going after assignments of substitute trustees like crazy, and we've landed ourselves some great deals right there.
And I just want to add that on our last slide, we do have AG's information so that if anybody is interested in finding out more about his subject to deal classes, we will be able to provide you with contact information for real acquisition so that you can stay in touch with them. And AG, we're so happy to have you on here again. We are coming up with our last 4 minutes and we do have one question. So we'll try to get through these next few slides as quickly as possible so we don't run over anybody's lunch hour. But Charles, we will get to your question here shortly.
So we kind of covered this slide with our last webinar, but rates are really, really low right now. There's really no indicator that they're going to change anytime soon. That's a quote from the Fed chairman down there. We're not even thinking of raising interest rates. That was a month ago. So that's great for the market in general, right? It makes it easier for folks to buy properties. If you're an individual wanting to either refinance your current mortgage or maybe get some cash out of an investment property or your owner-occupied property, get pre-approved and get everything set and locked in so that when you do have a rate that you're happy with that makes sense for you, you can call your loan officer and lock it, because you can't just call and lock like day one. You can't call us day one and say, hey, I want to lock a rate. It's not that simple. You have to get pre-approved, sit in your documents. Once you're done, then you can lock a rate and talk to your loan officer. But this is just great fuel for the market, these low rates. This is the slide that we kind of covered last time as well, but for you guys that weren't with us last time, it shows historically back from the 70s all the way when it was up to 16-17%. To where it is today, right? I think that dip is right at 4%. We've done a lot of investment deals in the 4s. So investment deals are typically, whenever you hear what's the going interest rate, it's kind of advertised. If you're doing an investment property, you can typically add about 1% to that, and that's roughly what's going on in the market at that time.
And this just even if you were slightly overpaying and the market does go down a little bit, with historically low rates relative to someone who purchases what may be perceived to be a better deal, maybe at a little better price, more in the middle of the dip. If you're paying 6, 8, 10%, which many people did for a long time, you're obviously going to have far better cash flow because of just having an extremely low payment.
Before we get into this next slide, I'm going to go ahead and ask Charles a question because it was on one of our earlier slides. He is asking for a summarization of the 4 do not or do's, i.e. no speculation. And he said, why stay away from 500 to 1,000?
Yeah, it was a 500,000 to 1.5 million range. Historically, this range, especially markets like Houston, is the first line where people with economic crisis are heavily impacted. In case of Houston, this is the market range. This is the price range where families with dual incomes buy homes. These are typically people that don't have that much cash reserves. They really should be buying homes below $500,000, but they're living beyond our means is a way of the future, I guess. So people like buying homes in this price range. And we don't like dealing in this price range at all. People who are buying homes above 1.5 million, these are guys who are truly wealthy and are not typically impacted by these short-term ups and downs in the economy. That's as simple as that. The third reason was staying away from projects where the rehab is more than 30% of ARV, meaning stay away from big projects. And the last was staying away from projects where the via short-term or long-term rental, you cannot cover the debt service. So don't buy where debt service cannot be covered by renting the property. Those are the 4 do nots.
Thank you, AG.
Alrighty. So I'll end with this, guys, which is in all of my conversations with my friends all over the country, there are portfolio managers that are managing REITs, that are investing in REITs. 2 trends that I'm seeing big time is a overindulgence in land purchases. Guys are getting into syndications, REITs are getting big time into land purchases. And I think a lot of this is driven by the fact that landowners or non-income producing properties are typically difficult to move during the times of crises. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And traditionally, any time where we go through a financial crisis or financial readjustment, I wouldn't really call this a financial crisis. We go through a financial turbulent times. Land deals are always plenty. So a lot of these guys are getting into land deals. And if you are in Texas and you don't 100 acres, shame on you. You should not be a Texan. You can't call yourself a Texan if over the course of your lifetime you've not been able to buy acreage, man. Come on. So in Texas, buy some land. This is a great time to be getting into land deals. And number 2, a trend that has been accelerated, especially because of COVID, is affordable housing. It is estimated that the number of people who traditionally in the United States require affordable housing is give or take about 30%. We're now estimating that because of this almost 8 months of lost income, this number is going to be closer to 40%. So we have a 10% additional population in the United States. It's close to about 3 million plus people who are now going to be looking for more affordable housing. So a lot of these syndicators and big firms are getting into more aggressively into affordable housing. So these 2 trends are definitely something that you guys should be looking out for.
Thank you.
Wade, Jeff, do you have anything to add on this slide?
You're muted, Wade.
No, I said I know we're at 103, and I don't know if we have any questions that we needed to work through, but if we did, I thought it might be a good time to do that.
We just had, we had the one, and then the other questions aren't specifically for you guys. They're things like, hey, can you send me a copy? If anybody else has any questions before you sign off, you hit the little question box on the side, or you can raise your hand and we can call out to you. But if you do not, and you may later, go ahead and take down our information. We have real acquisitions info right here. So if you guys are interested in finding out more from them, what they can do for you, you can contact them here. And then as well for us on the left-hand side, as always, add us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. We will be posting some of these webinars on YouTube. We do not post them all on YouTube. So make sure to tell your friends to sign in and sign up so that they can get copies of the presentation. Everyone that was registered for this will get a copy of this presentation. So thank you for that question. AG, did you have any final thoughts before we signed off?
No, I just see a question or a comment from a participant. Sounds like a wrap around. If you're talking about subject to charge, no, it is absolutely not a wrap. It's literally as simple as taking over somebody's payment. Now you can sell that as a wrap. But on the buy side, this is definitely not a wrap. It's just literally somebody taking over somebody's payments. That's what subject to is. And in the end, I'll tell you guys, these are very, very interesting times, to say the least. This is a time where if you guys are focused, if you guys are not sitting on the sidelines and waiting and watching, you can truly build yourself a financial legacy for many generations to come. So get aggressive, roll up your sleeves, get to work, and let's make some money in real estate.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks,
All right.
AG.
Yeah, thanks, AG. Appreciate you.
Great, Jeff, Destiny, thanks for all the wonderful work that you guys do. Can't wait to see you guys back at our events.
Yes, we
Likewise.
look forward to it. Have a great one.
Looking forward to it. Bye-bye.